Okay, so we have started the recording. So first of all, welcome from my side and also from Peter, Surender, and Tamer. So all the four guest editor of this JBR special issue paper development workshop. We are going to now spend a couple of hours together. Here I have reported the agenda so that you know how we will spend this fruitful time, hopefully. There will be a plenary session of about 40 minutes, 10 minutes each. So luckily we are only 4, otherwise it would have been much larger. I'm kidding, of course. Plenary session during which we will try to give you some insights about, let's say, the rationale behind this special issue. So why we decided to promote the special issues on emerging multinational enterprise, and on this first part I will focus in the next 10 minutes. And then there will be some theoretical discussion by Peter. So he will show us some challenge that we need still to face and to deal with when talking about emerging multinational enterprise, the future perspective about this type of companies, and this will come from Tamer, and finally Surender will give us some guidelines for the review process, which are general guidelines that you can apply regardless of the topic, and also will bring us to the parallel session. So we'll be then we will be divided into different breakout rooms in which we will give you specific suggestions on the comments. In particular, we will give you also our considerations, our insights as regard the specific issues that you sent us through your slides that you would like to go more in depth, and also we will of course maybe give some other suggestion about some aspect that we believe to be relevant for your specific paper. And then we will try to save about 10 minutes for the Q&As if you have some final questions, doubts, and so on, and also to give some closing remarks and just say goodbye. Okay. So here, okay, that's an empty slide just because I sent these slides to Surender. So Surender will show you basically how we are going to divide into the breakout room. So let me start with my short presentation. So I will take a few minutes just to try to understand with you why we decided another special issues on emerging multinational enterprise, because we have been talking about emerging multinational enterprise for more than 20 years nowadays, and there have been several special issues, and so why did we feel at some point that we needed to develop another special issues on emerging multinational enterprise? In order to answer this question, let's start from the past. These 3 slides that now I will show comes also from a panel presentation that I did in the AIB. So for those of you who have attended that panel, we see something that they have already seen, but it's always useful to understand why we decided to basically organize these special issues on the Journal of Business Research. As I was saying, 10 years ago when I completed my PhD, basically the main state of art was that the driver of internationalization of emerging multinational enterprise was mainly of asset-seeking type. So companies were trying to internationalize in order to search for those assets, knowledge, technologies that was not available in their home country due to their weak national innovation system. The main entry mode adopted by emerging multinational enterprise was acquisition of partnership, because of course it was the most straightforward, the fastest way to access such assets, knowledge, and technology. And as regard the ownership advantage, the main idea was that Yemenis were basically not possessing strong intangible assets like innovation capabilities, technology, and brands. They were more possessing some country-specific advantage or some type of advantages that were related to production capabilities rather than intangible assets. And that's why they were doing asset-seeking investment. This one was the state of art more or less 10 years ago. But then, of course, as I was saying, in the last 15, 20 years, emerging multinational enterprises have pushed their internationalization strategy. So they have persistently internationalized by undertaking foreign direct investments in developing and advanced markets. Indeed, there are some papers from you that focus on this also dichotomy between investing in developing and advanced markets. And what's happened already a few years ago, in 2012, for instance, Kazura was observing that the more Yemenis become experienced, the more the modus operandi was becoming similar to that one of advancing multinational enterprise. So this was observed already 8 years ago. And also, sorry, it's not going the presentation. Okay. Wang Li Ying in 2014 were observing that the pattern of internationalization of emerging and advanced economies were converging already in 2014. And finally, Rajanish Narula in 2015 was observing, for instance, that there was a set of high-tech and knowledge-intensive sectors which were capital-intensive and skill-dependent that were rising in emerging countries together with the traditional labor-intensive activities. So something was changing already in the first half of the past decade. And in addition, let me report also some results that I found with some co-authors that are showing that something seems emerged and something seems more still emerging about emerging multinational enterprise. For instance, in a paper that I published with Grazia Sant'Angelo, we found that while the early internationalization of emerging multinational enterprise was driven by the lack of a strong national innovation system in the home countries of these companies, the latest investments were driven by a complementary relationship. So there was a positive relationship between the national innovation system of emerging countries and the asset-seeking investments. And therefore, this seems that also the national innovation system of the home countries of these type of company has evolved, is changing, and therefore also its relationship with respect to the way in which it supports the asset-seeking investment of emerging multinational enterprise. However, what we have found is that emerging multinational enterprises seems to be still less likely to invest in location with strong host country national innovation system, especially when emerging multinational enterprise operate in high-tech industries. So it still seems to be some distance, probably knowledge, technology distance that refrain emerging multinational enterprises from investing, especially when they operate in high-tech industries in host countries with very strong national innovation system. In a paper with Ilan Arlon and Xiaoming Li, we have found that emerging multinational enterprises have started to use more frequently greenfield investments as long as they gain experience. Although whenever they are unexperienced, they still prefer M&As. So it is probably worth investigating whether this is a specific characteristic of emerging multinational enterprise or just this type of behavior comes from the fact that they are unexperienced, and this could be applied also to unexperienced advanced multinational enterprise. And finally, in a recent paper that I published with Peter Buckley and Mario Cafors, we have found that Yemenis have partially upgraded their innovation capability thanks to their M&As, cross-border M&As. However, they seem to have improved their innovation capabilities more whenever they invest in emerging than in advanced countries. And this seems to connect to the first results. So still, it seems that there are some knowledge technology gap to fill when investing in advanced countries. And in addition, what we have found is that although Yemenis seems to have become better able to manage cultural distance and to gain innovation and capabilities when investing also in culturally distant countries, the same does not apply to institutional distance. So it seems that there is a negative relationship between the institutional distance and the extent to which MNEs are able to gain innovation capabilities. So you see that there are still some emerging sites and some emergent sites of emerging multinational enterprise. That's why we came up with this special issue. So we would like to understand with you, with your contribution, with your papers, with your valuable research, what is still emerging, so the red side, and what has been emerged, the blue side, about MNEs. We are very curious to discover with you what you think is still belonging to the initial phase of MNEs internationalization, and what has changed, and what is becoming more similar to advanced multinational enterprise, or maybe different, but still different also from the past, from the initial investments. And we would like you also to help us to set the agenda for future research, especially to better understand, for instance, from a theoretical point of view, how we should approach MNEs. And this is something that we will discuss also with Peter in the next presentation, and also to better understand the future challenge that MNEs have to face, the future perspective that they have, also as regard the mega trends that they have to face, that have been identified, for instance, in the World Investment Report 2020 and also 2021, such as the digitalization, the sustainability, or the political issues, nationalism, or the battle for global leadership among the giants, and so on. So, and this is something that also we will see with Tamer in his presentation. So we would like you to help us to set the agenda for future research. Let me conclude with some numbers. It's always useful to understand not only the rationale of these special issues, but also whether indeed it was a successful or not special issue, and also whether indeed there was a common sense that we needed to understand more about MNEs. And apparently it seems so, because we launched the call in January 2020, and we got 97 long abstract submissions in July 2020. So this means that, of course, on the one hand, there are several people, several people who are working on this topic, but on the other hand, there is still a lot to understand, to research on MNEs, also because, as I said, it's a type of research that is subject to several updates, change. So MNEs are evolving, and therefore we need to understand how they're evolving. We invited at the end 33 abstracts to submit their full paper, and after the first round of revision, we got 17 papers that were accepted and were invited to resubmit their manuscript after, of course, the review. And you are, of course, among those 17. So you passed basically a selection of 97 abstracts and then 33 papers. Okay, so congratulations for being with us now and for sharing this paper development workshop with us. Of course, we will go through at least a couple of other rounds of review, and of course the fact that you have passed the first round doesn't mean that you will of course I wish you all to pass it, the second and the third round, but no one can of course ensure it. This will depend basically on you, on your ability to also address all the issues of the reviewers. And just to give you a date, we have a tentative publication of this special issue for the end of 2022 or beginning of 2023 at latest, because of course we needed to go through other 2 rounds, and therefore this will take about 1 year, let's say. And so the time that will be published will be at the end of next year or at the beginning of 2023. So let me wish you good luck. Let me say thank you again for being with us, and I hope you will enjoy the rest of the presentation and also the parallel session later on. Thank you, and I leave the floor to Peter, so that he will show us the theoretical challenge associated to emerging multinational enterprise.
Okay. This doesn't seem to be, there we go. Okay, I think picking up very much on what Stefano has said there, what is emerging about emerging market multinationals, I think the basic approach of theory is things are always emerging. New challenges to the theory are always emerging, and therefore the theory itself has to emerge, has to change. And of course, emerging market multinationals have been and possibly continue to be a major challenge for theory, because theories such as internalization theory were developed at a time when multinationals were largely Western and Japanese. They were largely manufacturing multinationals. They were largely privately owned. And of course, a lot of emerging market multinationals are none of these things. And so the first sort of debate, the first issue is, do you need a new theory because this is a new phenomenon? Or does established theory actually meet the challenge of the new phenomenon? And this is an ongoing thing. This isn't a once for all. It's not like a European final, somebody wins, somebody loses. It's more about how the theory can adapt and develop, and does it contain the issues that are emerging. And so the kind of two schools here. One school is it's a new phenomenon, we need new theory. And the other school is existing theory can cope with this. I fall into the second category. And I would argue that what we need is a special theory within the general theory of internalization to cope with that. And that's very much the approach we took on our paper on Chinese outward foreign direct investment in JIBS that won the Decade Award. But that's not to say that the context and the application of the theory is necessary to change. And so people have suggested different approaches. Now, whether these are really different theories or whether these can be nested within the general theory is, again, another question. One approach is springboard, and I'm going to talk about that a little more in a moment, where we could have different types of springboarding. And Peter Endewick and I have written a paper where we look at different types of springboarding. The idea being that you are overcoming competitive disadvantages. Stefano talked about this, the advantages approach, firm-specific advantage and country-specific advantage. The argument about springboarding is that you upgrade and you overcome potential competitive disadvantages. Then we've got the LLL, linkage, leverage, and what's the third one? Linkage, leverage, and learning. This is more about different types of strategy, perhaps, than the theoretical approach. And then we've got the whole idea that we need to bring in the home country far more. Now, what I'd like to see with this escape response, the idea that you invest abroad to get away from constraints at home and to be able to then use your foreign investment to internationalize. What I'd like to suggest is that all these things are relevant for all multinationals, that the different strategies within a small firm may have to do an equivalent to springboarding. Other firms from perhaps disadvantaged regions of advanced regions might mimic LLL strategies. So again, emerging market multinationals are extremely interesting as a challenge to theory, and also to bring new ideas into theory. And so one approach of this is to look at so-called new internalization theory, which looks at the balance between firm-specific advantages and country-specific advantages. And here the crucial thing is, what is the theoretical mechanism by which country-specific advantages are kind of captured by individual firms and turn into firm-specific advantages? And this is linked very closely with the resource-based view of the firm, that the firm has particular factor market usually advantages in resources, which it can use to internationalize. Now, a few sort of points about this. The first point, of course, is that emerging market multinationals themselves are not homogeneous. Chinese firms are different from Indian firms, are different from Thai firms. Firms that have digitized are different from firms that have not, and so on. So we have family firms being very important in emerging market firms. State-owned firms are very different. So which factor is important? Is it the fact that they're from an emerging market, or is it the fact that they're actually family firms or state-owned firms that make the difference? And one thing that emerging market multinational approaches have done is to bring a lot of more focus on the home market, on the country from which the investment comes, and their government in particular. Springboarding, again, covers a variety of things. It covers, and Peter Endwick and I looked at the idea of path following, where you're following existing firms, path compressing, where you're trying to reduce the process of internationalization over time, and path creating, which means you're being very innovative. So the next issue that really emerging market firms have brought to the fore is the use of outsourcing. And the argument here, Surender and I have done a paper on this, where it's arguable that outsourcing is not a negative thing, it's actually a positive thing, that you're using outsourcing to upgrade and perhaps moving out the things that you're not so good at to concentrate on the things that you are good at. So this is not only about outsourcing, it's about reconfiguring the firm, reorganizing the firm, reallocating resources within the firm, and moving to core strengths. And this links to the next issue. Very important, and a lot of the papers in the special issue touch on this. Some of them go into it in more detail than others. And this is the question, can MNEs innovate? Are they just followers? Are they just imitative, which a lot of early Chinese internationalizers were? Or are they really innovating? Are they at the innovation frontier? Are they moving towards the innovation frontier? Yes. Have they moved beyond it in large areas? Question mark. And this leads to the issue of how we integrate international business internationalization theory with theories of entrepreneurship and the role of entrepreneurship in internationalization. Again, this is an issue that is not just about emerging market multinationals. The two-way interaction of innovation and internationalization is really vital for all theories of the multinational enterprise. This is an older story that emerging market multinationals' foreign market entry strategy is very different. It has unique characteristics with Indian firms in particular internationalized by mergers and acquisitions. So do a lot of other companies. If you've got financial resources, or you can mobilize financial resources, maybe you can buy advantages abroad, you can buy into firm-specific advantages. And finally, the whole aspect of internationalization strategies has come up again because of emerging market multinationals. The directionality of internationalization in emerging markets is very different from what we might call the traditional Uppsala approach, that you go to culturally proximate countries and then gradually go to more culturally distant countries. This is not the pattern generally for emerging market multinationals. Now, one other issue that comes up here, and again, we're grateful to emerging market multinationals for drawing our attention to this again, is the crucial distinction here, not emerging market and advanced market, but inexperienced versus experienced foreign direct investors. Is the first foreign investment different from the later ones? Is there learning going on? So there are massive numbers of theoretical issues that have been either surfaced by emerging market multinational study or re-emerged after being perhaps neglected for a while. And the final thing, how are emerging market firms, like all other firms, going to react to the fracture in the global economy? The protectionism, the division into the Chinese camp and the US camp, that's very simplistic. But if with the splinter net, with the damage to the integrated internet that's happening, are we going to see different strategies in reaction to that from emerging market companies versus advanced market countries? Or will there be different approaches? So the story is never finished, it's always ongoing, and the theoretical contributions that we hope we'll see in this special issue may center on some of the issues that I've raised there. We don't expect people to tackle all of them, but it'd be nice if we could shed some light on some of these crucial issues, because these are really very important and go beyond the issue of just emerging market multinationals. Very rapid run through of some very important issues, but I'll stop there and we'll move on. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, Peter, and Stefano as well. Let me offer some comments as well. First of all, when Stefano put up that slide that showed the timeline, we started this process in January 2020, and when he talks about completing the process maybe in 23, you can see how long of a process this is. And I'm just hope that nobody was counting on acceptance for their tenure. I think most of you are beyond that, hopefully. But the good news is that congratulations to all of you. You have come this far. We have 17 papers. There's no reason why, if you adequately respond to the reviewer comments and do your homework and refine your papers, that your paper will not be published. So that is the good news. So congratulations to you for having traveled this journey this far. In my comments, looking forward a little bit, I will try to complement what Peter has said so elegantly and so wisely. And I won't repeat myself with a couple of sessions we've had just a couple of weeks ago at the AIB, where we talked about a little bit about emerging market multinationals and emerging markets in general. And I also written several papers, so I will not again repeat myself with what I said there, but I'll try to offer 4 or 5 directions in terms of research in this area. And this will really hopefully inspire you for your future research. It's not necessarily about your papers that are currently in the review process. So the first theme is sort of, again, what Peter has reminded us, the principle of one size does not fit all. I mean, when we treat all EM&Es the same as a homogeneous group, we're making a big mistake. There's a lot of diversity among them in many ways. And often up until now, I think we've seen them as a homogeneous group and overlooked the differences. Just imagine, for example, the country of origin matters. Country matters, where the particular AMNE that we're studying originates from matters. Just in the last several weeks, you've been exposed to the amazing case of Didi, the car-hailing company from China that tried to enlist in the New York Stock Exchange and was stopped by the Chinese government, fearing that there will be some information that will be shared with the public around the world, and they didn't want to see that. So that's kind of interesting how the activities of an emerging market multinational it can be curtailed by the home country government. So it's, it reminds us that country matters. Also, ownership matters, the type of ownership, whether we're talking about state enterprises, which we studied in the context of Chinese multinationals, especially, or privately held firms. A lot of family conglomerates from India, holding companies from India, chaebols from South Korea, grupos from Latin America, and so on. In fact, when we studied those EMNEs, we've overlooked the fact that they're not publicly owned. So we assume, I think we put on our Western researchers' hats and assume that the governance system is very similar between family owned and publicly owned. And we made a big mistake, I think, in that sense. There's actually a third category as well, partially public companies. And we have not seen studies focused on that. That is, quite a few large family conglomerates actually list their stock and they sell up to 20–30% of their stock to the public. So this is a hybrid emerging market multinational that we have overlooked. So I think the type of ownership should be something that we study in the future as well. This difference between established and new multinationals. There's so many new entrants that have come on to the market compared to the very well-established family conglomerates in Mexico, in Turkey, in India, and so on. I think we need to also keep that in mind. Also, recently, we have overlooked the study of service industry multinationals, right? So most of us have done work on manufacturing companies. And we see now quite a few service industries in healthcare, in finance, in other types of service industries becoming very global in context, in scope. So for example, we see quite a few Turkish large multinationals in the hospital business or healthcare business, expanding very aggressively to Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Middle East, and so on. And we have not really focused on service industry multinationals from emerging markets. And of course, most recently, and we talked about this a little bit too, the digital enterprises, they also represent the new organization of multinationals, and we have to look at them. And there's two groups really there. One is a very small group, very small startups, digital enterprises. We see a lot in China, for example, and another group that really break through and become very large organizations, very large multinationals entering unicorns. There's many unicorns, for example, entering the global marketplace. We've also, I think, overlooked the distinction between professionally managed family conglomerates from emerging markets versus family-owned ownership and family-owned direction governance system. I think that's something also that we should be looking at. In one piece of research focusing on multinationals from Brazil, we looked at the reasons behind their late internationalization. When you look at the experience of Brazilian firms, large family-owned Brazilian firms, they've really come onto the international marketplace rather late in the last 20 years or so. So based on interviews with quite a few of them, we realized that what held them was a very profitable domestic market, and also the fact that Brazil itself is a very large market that would cater to the growth needs of these companies. But also what enabled them was also interesting. What enabled them was the existence of what we call organizational slack. the fact that there was quite a bit of managerial capacity, capability, well-trained, Western-trained managers leading these companies with global ambitions that took them abroad. So the existence of organizational slack, managerial slack in these companies was the big reason why they went international, even though they went international very late.
Thomas, sorry, we have still a couple of minutes maximum. Okay, yeah. If you can close. Thank you very much.
So I think speaking about the digital enterprises, also it's interesting to consider the financing models of the new and digital enterprises that we see. I talked about in one of the AIB sessions, I hope you were there and I can share some information on that as well. The case of this Getir e-commerce company, which is in the delivery of grocery business, e-grocery business, that started in Istanbul on the promise of delivering your groceries under 10 minutes. And now they are in Western Europe. They are the leading company in London, for example, Amsterdam, Paris, several cities in Germany, and so on. This company is now a $7.5 billion valuation company. They started with very little of their own resources, but they grow entirely on venture capital investment. So that's kind of interesting that we have this new breed of digital multinational enterprises from emerging markets that go international with somebody else's funds. So that's a new reality, a new financing model that we need to keep in mind. So let me just stop there. We have a chance maybe later on to talk about some of these as well, so that we give you a chance to break out into sessions. But before we do that, let's, Surinder, you wanted to have some a few minutes for your comments as well.
Okay, let's proceed with Surinder.
Thank you, Stefano. Let me open up my slides. I will not take too long. I just have a couple of slides just to give a few tips and share our expectations with the friends who are attending. So let me share my screen. Give me a minute. I hope you can see my screen now. Can you?
Yes.
Perfect. So I would say welcome again. Thank you for making your submissions to the special issue. And thanks for coming and attending this workshop. So in terms of, I think what I should say, the task that has been given to me is to provide you some expectations that we have with you and the guidance and some final word of advice, which I am more than happy to share. But as you can see that I don't have too many slides there. Why? Because I know that many of you are very experienced researcher with lots and lots of publication and also with the editorial experience. So I don't think that there is anything special that I need to tell you in terms of how you should be addressing the reviewer comments. But indeed, just wanted to highlight that we are very serious about this, this special issue. We want to publish a very high quality, impactful special issue. And we believe that the work that you have submitted has potential. And that is the reason why your papers were selected. And that is the reason why we are doing this PDW at the first place. So again, I think Stefano very rightly said that there are loads and loads of special issues that has been published in the past, and we don't want this to be one among many others, and then get lost in that crowd. So we have a very special thought process, which Stefano has very clearly explained to you. And there is a very clear niche, which is what is still emerging about EMNEs, right? So obviously this is a very, emerging multinational are a very broad research area of inquiry, which again, you must have from your previous research and from your reading understood that scholars have been attempting to study them from various angles. But here we have a very special focus on what's still emerging. And Stefano provided you clear thought. And I think what I would like to suggest to you is that I'm not saying that you have not gone through the call for papers. You have, certainly. But having read the papers, although we believe that there is a potential that you can contribute to the special issue, but still there is there's a scope for you to clearly articulate how you are addressing the call for papers. In some papers, although there's a clear indication, but it is not very explicitly said. And all I can say is that the reviewers may or may not be picking up on how does that fit with the call for papers, but we as guest editors, we have a very clear responsibility that we don't want odd papers to be included. We want papers to be very clearly highlighting how they are contributing to the special issue. So I think very first advice that I will have is that read the call for papers once again, go through these presentations that Stefano, Peter, and what Tamir has said in terms of the empirical challenges. And I think that this is already shaping your thoughts anyway. And try and very clearly articulate how you are addressing the call for papers. The call for papers has already provided you quite detailed description and 10 research questions. And these are not 10 research questions, these are 10 overarching research questions with many sub-questions within each of them. And the ranges from ownership advantages to home country factors, host country factors, distance, governance, performance, and so on. And your paper clearly fits somewhere. So what I want from you is that please make sure that you refer to the call for paper, specify which question you are addressing and why you're addressing that and how you're addressing that. And I think this is very critical for us with the aim that we want to produce an impactful, high quality special issue. And if this doesn't really fit, then as Stefano said, that he was saying that still there will be a ground for rejection. And I can clearly remember that Tame was very positive in saying that we don't want to reject, we expect that you should be publishing here. So the advice is that you clearly articulate how you're addressing and address some of those questions very clearly. JBR indeed is a very high quality journal with a rising and a very high site score and impact factor. As you can see, it's 9.2 now and 7.55 impact factor, and its readership is going up very heavily across the globe. And the top 3 countries, including US, China, one of them is an emerging now, it's China. So US, Europe, and China being the 3 largest countries where the readership is growing up very rapidly. So I think that's the main advice that I have. The point here is not to tell you how you should be addressing the reviewer comment in general, because as I said that you probably know how to do that anyway, but there may be specific questions which we understand you might have, and these questions may arise because either the reviewer comments are competing comments and you want to know from us how you can address those comments, especially when they're competing, or some comments may not be clear enough to you and you may have confusions with regard to how to address them and what the comment really mean. And that was one of the reasons why we thought that you must come here prepared with the slides that you had already sent to us, highlighting 3 key important areas that you want to talk to us. We have got your slides. We have already gone through with them. And now the plan is to send you into breakout rooms. So these are the papers that each of the guest editor is looking after. And that means that there are 4 breakout rooms in which you should be soon going and meeting your guest editor there. So with that, I think I would stop here, and the people who are helping us on the technology side, they know who are going where, and they should be able to send you into the breakout rooms, and you should see one of us out there. So pretty much that's it.
Thank you, Surinder. And Rebecca has already assigned you to one of these 4 rooms. So if you get lost and Rebecca is there, just tell her where you'd like to go.
Okay, thank you. So now we should be assigned directly by Rebecca to the rooms, right, Tamer? Is that correct?
It'll take a second
okay.
for Rebecca to.
And we will come back in 1 hour. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we're back again, and I think the other groups are coming in as well.
Yeah. How did this go for you?
Oh, very good. Very open and yeah, a very enjoyable session. I think we gave the referees a good kicking, really. That's what it's all about.
I want to apologize to the last set of co-authors in my session. They were cut short, and but we can talk offline.
Yeah, the same for me. I was
Did you
completing
not
my
see
discussion.
the clock ticking down? I had the clock there. I was watching the clock the whole time. 15 seconds to go. That's it.
It was predetermined, according to Stefan.
No, it's perfect. Perfect. Really, very good. I'm very pleased.
No, what we needed is a clock with a countdown. Probably it would have been helpful.
But we have
to
the
remind
little
us.
one in the corner. You've got to be observant.
Yeah, but I didn't know that there was such a cut at the end. But I mean, now we'll conclude offline as well with.
So we can, we can turn to our participants here. We appreciate all of you. But was this session helpful? Hopefully it was. Do you have any remaining questions, queries, comments? I think you're off to a good start, and hopefully the reviewers' comments were helpful.
Okay, you have a comment? Chris is saying the session was very helpful.
I think most of the comments so far has been very positive. They liked it. Maybe they are hesitant and shy that they don't want to tell us anything negative on our face. But I do hope. And there was a question which was whether we will be able to share the recording of this session, the first session that we had, and I said that we should be able to. So
that would be very helpful, because I had one paper where the people came in late. They got the time problem. So if they could see the recording of the first hour, that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rebecca will clarify, but I think we have recorded it, so we'll certainly make it available. Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
And okay, we will share also these slides. Okay, definitely. And I also recall the invitation that was sent by Surinder to try to also highlight, especially maybe in the discussion conclusion, the connection with our special issue, and also to highlight how you are going to contribute to the different points, to the theories that was suggested, one of the future challenges suggested by Tamer and so on. Okay.
So Rebecca just confirmed that the plenary session was recorded, so we will make that recording available to everybody.
Okay.
Tamer, first of all, good morning.
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 I have a general, and good morning to everybody else as well. I didn't mean to isolate everybody else, Alvaro and Sumit and everyone. I do have a general question, and that has to do with just the pedagogy of what is the general limit on response to reviewers. I currently am reviewing a paper that's 145 pages long, and that's after the first round. So we're going to the second round, and I wanted to be kind to the reviewers and get some sense of how brief or how extensive should these comments be. And coming from an editor, it shouldn't, that should. Anyhow, I feel the pain, and I just want to make sure that we don't overdo it.
Yeah, I hear you, Saeed, and I think being concise and to the point is always good. It may be a debate. In some cases, you may have to disagree and provide your point of view. So that will take a little bit more elaboration. But, I think hopefully, I'm hoping I don't remember your reviewers, but hopefully they were straightforward and you can respond adequately to their comments and questions and suggestions. But yeah, I don't, personally, like you, I don't like to see pages and pages and pages. Sometimes the reviewer comments are several times longer than the paper itself.
Yes.
I would put all of my efforts into the paper rather than, do over excessively, do it excessive job with the responses document.
Yeah, and that would be ideal. The nature of, and I'm just selfishly thinking of our own reviews. I mean, the nature is such that it requires more than the minimum or one-liner response. And so anyhow, I appreciate that insight. We'll do the best we can to keep it to as concisely as shorter response as possible.
Mm-hmm. Good.
I was going to add one comment. Thank you, Tamer, for your insights, and oftentimes, some things are doable and some things are not doable because we have constraints. And this is a very valuable lesson for all of us. And I thank Tamer and the team for helping us, what can be accomplished, I mean, we always strive to send a good response to the reviewers, but of course, within our boundary conditions. So if there is a data set that has boundary conditions and constraints, we can only do so much, Thank you.
Being polite and professional is always, what we expect, because they're our colleagues. Some reviewers are people just like us. I think sometimes maybe the younger generation gets out of hand a little bit. They don't understand the professionalism that is very critical to our discipline and profession. I think we need to be cognizant of that. Sometimes they can be too brutal, and the choice of words, I think, is very important. When you write the responses document, imagine that the person is sitting ahead of you, is sitting in front of you at the table. So don't say something that you wouldn't say in person to that person, to that reviewer. Be kind.
I want to take this opportunity to thank you all, guest editors, for taking the time, reading the papers, selecting reviewers. Our paper might be seen as a niche paper. These reviews have been really good. Will take us a lot of time and effort to implement in the paper. And choosing right reviewers is sometimes very difficult. But you've done a very good job. The comments have been excellent in improving the paper, and fingers crossed. But thank you very much for your efforts.
Well, thank you for those comments. We appreciate it. Stefano did the heavy lifting in terms of corresponding and keeping track of every paper. So we appreciate Stefano's help as well. This past year has been difficult for all of us, but I think, you know, it's accomplishments like this that provide some relief from the pain that we all suffered. You know, I feel that, you know, we're so fortunate to be in this profession that we kept on going. Our mental capabilities were put to use. We didn't stay idle. We kept writing and teaching and interacting. And I think that saved our mental health, I would say. And accomplishments like this, you know, getting your paper to a refined level, I think are some nice bonuses, some nice payoffs that we receive. So
let me add also, congratulations to the authors, because we received a very interesting paper. We really want them to become even better than they are now. So we believe in the potential of this paper. So we are trying to do our best together with the reviewers to help to reach this goal, because we want to have very good papers, and we believe that you submitted very interesting manuscripts with a high potential. We want to reach the maximum of this potential together with you and your collaboration, and with the collaboration with the editors, of course.
So very good. I think we'll bring this to a conclusion. Thank you so much for participating today. And it's always good to see some familiar faces and see some new faces. And congratulations again, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
everyone. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.